Bastian?
Magus Corsellis called, interrupting Bastian as he diligently studied in the library of the arcane halls. Bastian looked up, surprised but pleased to see his mentor.
Yes, Professor?
He replied, closing his copy of Beatrice's Field Guide to Summoning. Magus Corsellis, his long white beard flowing over the silver-lined robes that marked his status, smiled warmly, his laugh lines deepening.
The magistrate of the Stygian Reach has requested our help. A magical artifact, the infamous Void Heart Crystal, has been stolen. Cedarius is too parsimonious to hire a master mage, so I recommended you.
Bastian stood, his heart racing. He had recently passed his trials and was now a journeyman mage. This would be his first solo assignment, and for a magistrate no less.
Me?
Magus Corsellis's eyes twinkled with both pride and excitement for his student.
Indeed.
He nodded.
I know you will do well.
He beamed, patting Bastian on the shoulder.
Follow your training and do not underestimate your abilities.
You are listening to The Sleeping Dragon, a Starfall Rest story, created by Benign Chaos. Bastian, played by S.D. Pixley. Mercenaries, played by Matthew Woodings. Chapter 6. A month had passed since Bastian's conversation with Magus Corsellis. As the candlelight flickered in a private room at the Horse and Wheel, Bastian wrote to his mentor, reporting on his progress.
Professor Corsellis, it is the 17th day of our pursuit. I discovered the Voidheart Crystal's trail near Willowhaven Deep. The dense forest made tracking difficult at times, but we have followed its fading traces north to Grimswell Crossroads. We have taken respite for the night at the Horse and Wheel, a fine establishment and well recommended. Tomorrow, we press onward through the North Shore farmlands along the Great North Road. The trail grows clearer by the day, and I believe we are gaining ground. However, the thief's path leads toward the Stormhorn Mountains. I must confess, I do not relish the thought of venturing into those heights, as the snow still lays thick upon the peaks, for it is still early spring. Nevertheless, I shall follow wherever this journey takes me and see this task through. I shall update you on our progress in due time. Given how marked the trail grows, I hope to overtake the thief soon and send good news. Your devoted student, Bastian Idris, Journeyman Mage, Mage's Order.
He delivered his letter to the innkeeper, Atterbury, to post before retiring to his room. Yawning and stretching, he was grateful to have a bed for the night after the long journey from the arcane conservatory through the brambles at Willowhaven Deep to Grimswell Crossroads. Come the morning, the golden light stretched across the landscape, causing the dew-covered grass to twinkle as the small party rode along the Great North Road. They were few, just Bastian, Cedarius, and 3 guardsmen. One guardsman drove a small cart, its purpose puzzling Bastian. But he knew better than to question a man of the magistrate's rank. Perhaps the artifact was large. The aural residue of the magical artifact flickered faintly. To the untrained eye, it might look like a trick of the light, a weary traveller's illusion that danced and disappeared. But Bastian recognized it. A thread of silver light, shimmering beyond the hedgerows to his left. It had strengthened, becoming bright enough for him to discern without his incense a staff. Nor did he need to summon the silence with its power to perceive the unseen. They were getting close.
The thief stays hidden in the hedgerows to the west.
Bastian informed the party, his voice filled with confidence.
He follows the Great North Road.
His taciturn companions did not reply. Bastian fell into an uneasy silence with his companions. Bastian distracted his nerves by admiring the morning's delights. In the fields, stands of ancient oaks and elms were alive with waking birds greeting the dawn. On either side of the road, the hedgerows formed a natural barrier, their thick, tangled growth a haven for small creatures. Bastian glimpsed rabbits darting through the underbrush, and the flash of a fox's tail as it disappeared into the thicket. As the morning wore on, a dragon flew overhead, interrupting Bastian's thoughts. Its crimson scales glinted in the sun like polished rubies, reminding him of the few dragons he had met at the arcane halls. He found their presence both intimidating and fascinating. He watched with interest as the dragon continued north, disappearing into the distance.
So Darius,
Bastian ventured, breaking the silence as a worrying thought struck him.
do you think the thief might be dangerous?
Sidarius's eyes flicked towards him, cold and calculating.
We must assume so, Bastian. Stay vigilant.
One of the younger guardsmen, a wiry man with a scar on his cheek and an arrogant smirk, chuckled darkly.
Don't worry, lad. We'll keep you safe.
Bastian offered a tight smile, feeling a deep unease. When they had set off from the arcane halls, only the older man-at-arms, Lucan, had accompanied them. At Grimswell Crossroads, they had picked up 2 more guardsmen and a cart, and Bastian did not like the look of the new men. Their presence felt sinister. The sun climbed higher as they continued their journey. The rhythmic clatter of the cartwheels and the steady hoofbeats of their horses were the only sounds as they passed small clusters of trees or the occasional farmhouse. They were alone on the Great North Road. Bastian tried to shake off his disquiet by focusing on his task, but the tension among the group was a silent undercurrent that gnawed at his confidence. Just then, another red dragon shot across the sky, heading south at a surprising speed.
Is that the dragon that passed us earlier? Why has he reversed directions?
Bastian asked, to no one in particular. Sidarius followed Bastian's gaze and recognized Lord Darkwood racing across the sky. Seeing him once could be dismissed as a coincidence, but Sidarius was on the hunt. Seeing Lord Darkwood twice, flying in the opposite direction at speed, was foreboding.
We must hasten our pace.
Sidarius murmured, spurring his horse into a trot.
How does the thief travel?
He asked Bastian. Bastian glanced to the left, seeking the shimmer of magical residue. The trail was thinner now, wisp-like, and unravelling in places, like a mist torn apart by the wind. It was fading. Bastian narrowed his eyes, calling upon his training to sharpen his sight. The trail flickered, fading into the bright morning sun. Something had changed. Did someone obscure the trail? The remaining traces of glittering dust left the barest of hints, barely enough to follow, but it did seem to continue northward.
The thief continues northward, following the road but staying hidden in the hedgerows,
he reported to his employer. Bastian, a fair equestrian at best, disliked trotting for long. As he rose and fell with his horse's gait, the now flickering magical trail made tracking harder by the mile. His legs ached, and his irritation grew as they rode for over an hour. He reminded himself of the trust that the Mage's Order and Magus Corsellis had placed in him, and did his best to stay calm. Suddenly, the red dragon raced over them again, this time heading north at an incredible speed. The dragon's unusual behavior seemed urgent.
That's odd.
Bastian murmured. Siderius's frown deepened while watching the dragon. The dragon swooped and landed near a copse of elms less than a mile down the road to the left, directly along the path of the residual trail.
That's very odd.
Bastian repeated.
What is very odd?
Asked Siderius gruffly.
The artifacts trail.
Bastian replied.
It seems to lead where that dragon landed. Do you think he follows the trail as well?
Siderius did not answer. He spurred his horse into a canter, and the others followed his lead, except for the guardsman driving the cart. Bastian's sense of apprehension deepened. Siderius, normally boastful of his conquests, wealth, or position, had been unusually silent all morning. Now, as they hastened toward the grove of elms, Darius's face was grim. The two new guardsmen lacked the professionalism Bastian expected of seasoned men-at-arms, and a dragon was racing back and forth through the skies. The gnawing unease that had been his companion all morning spread from his stomach to his chest and limbs as each oddity compounded his sense of dread. Determined to uncover the mystery, Bastian summoned the silence. He dropped his arms, letting the reins go slack, hoping his horse would stay with the group. Closing his eyes, he lowered his voice to the deep, low vibrato that resonated with the frequency of the silence.
Aeternum visio.
Without his incense to aid him, he hoped it would be enough. Upon opening his eyes, the silence surrounded him, enveloping him in its calm embrace. The residual magical trail, once little more than scattered dust, now sparkled brightly, like sunlight reflecting off water. Bastian was puzzled. He had never seen a magical aura with such a liquid iridescence, shimmering and dancing like water rippling in the wind. Bastian looked to the copse of elms where the dragon had landed. It was alight with magic, and he could hear the gentle fall of rain, though the sky was clear.
Rest, dear child, in the forest deep.
The distant song of a witch's coven, calling upon night magic, echoed hauntingly through the air.
Stars above, twinkling bright.
There are witches?
Bastian informed his employer, his voice tinged with surprise.
What do you mean?
Siderius asked, his brow furrowing.
The dragon, he's not alone.
Bastian's anxiety heightened. What if they were the thieves? Siderius's party was no match for a dragon and a coven. As they approached the grove of elms, the small party veered off the road and into the field. Suddenly, like a silver curtain of rain dropping to the ground, the bright light of magic that had engulfed the wood fell away, and the sounds of rain and coven magic ceased. Bastian could now clearly see the light of the artifact, glowing weakly through the trees.
The trail ends in the elm grove, Sir Darius. The aura, it is glowing a strange color, almost like the shimmer of dew at dawn. I have never seen a magical item that shines so.
Without warning, the horses reared and whinnied, nearly throwing their riders. The dragon, as large as the dwarven forge of Thelgrim and with scales as embers, came into view at the far end of the wood. His enormous wings resounded like thunder as he rose into the sky. Atop his back were two women, one with long, white hair flowing in the wind, and the other, smaller one, an ethereal girl, with large, white feathered wings shining in the morning sun. The ethereal girl's aura shimmered brightly, like dew at dawn. In confusion and horror, Bastian turned to Sidarius.
It is not a magical item you seek. It is a magical being. An ethereal. That is an ethereal on the dragon's back.
Sidarius's face twisted with fury, his eyes burning with anger and cruelty. Without a word, Sidarius glanced at Lucan and nodded. Bastian felt a surge of panic.
Wait, what are you...
He barely had time to react before the grizzled man ripped him from his saddle and threw him to the ground. The impact slammed into him like a hammer, pain jolting through his back and knocking the breath from his lungs, leaving him disoriented. Lucan was on him in an instant. A knee drove into his ribs, pinning him, a rough hand locked around his throat. Bastian couldn't breathe. His vision blurred as panic surged. He struggled, kicking and clawing at Lucan's arms. But the guardsman, his full weight pressing down upon Bastian, was too strong.
Please.
Bastian choked out, his voice barely a whisper. His wide, terrified eyes darted to Sidarius, silently pleading for mercy. But the magistrate only watched, his expression cold and pitiless. And then the horrifying truth hit him, colder than the steel at his throat. They had planned his death from the start. The blade flashed with one swift, practiced motion, a sharp, biting pain. And then it was over.
This is getting messy.
Lucan snarled as he wiped his knife clean on Bastian's silver-trimmed blue cloak. Scowling, he stood and turned to Sidarius, who had remained on his horse.
That was a witch queen, if ever there was one, riding on that dragon with your quarry. It's no concern of yours,
Spat Sidarius as his horse stomped uneasily.
It's a concern of mine if I get collared in your cock-up. I'm not paid enough for a dragon and a witch queen.
Lucan retorted, returning his knife to its hiding place beneath his vest. He scanned the sky and the elm grove for any signs of danger. He had been in too many tight spots to ignore small details in unfamiliar surroundings.
Do what you were hired to do and stick to the plan,
Sidarius said, as he glowered down at Lucan.
The Void Heart Crystal is still in Grimswell Crossroads. Retrieve it from my man and see that it finds its way into Sly Jack's home, along with the body.
Sidarius sneered.
Jack is a thief and a fool. No one will question it.
Sidarius turned his horse, looking down at the mercenary one last time.
We signed a blood contract, Lucan,
He said menacingly, before spurring his horse into a gallop, leaving the mercenaries to clean up.
You signed a blood contract, Lucan?
Asked the wiry mercenary, who had witnessed the entire exchange, as the man with the cart joined them.
You signed a blood contract with Darius.
The second mercenary echoed, equally amazed.
The man's a snake.
Lucan growled.
Only a fool would do business with him without a bond. Look what happened to this poor bloke,
He said, kicking the dead mage's foot. The man with the cart chuckled as he dismounted.
You act like you had nothing to do with his death. You made coin. We all did.
Lucan did not want to kill the mage. As with all his mortal contracts, he had made the young wizard's death as swift and painless as possible.
A man does what he must in this world.
Lucan murmured, a hint of regret in his voice. The two young mercenaries were leaning against the cart.
"We're framing Jack Dagger,"
the wiry one said with a smirk, as he expertly rolled a pipeweed smoke. His companion, the youngest of the three, chuckled. Lucan scowled at the two idiots.
You think this is funny? When it comes to thieving, Jack Dagger's a feckless idiot. He couldn't organize a piss-up in a brewery, but he handles knives like a goddamn wizard. He's a blade master in the Thieves' Guild.
That don't mean nothing.
The youngest mercenary snorted.
I can handle knives,
he bragged, taking out his knife and flipping it.
That means everything, you idiot.
Lucan snapped, snatching the knife out of the air and pointing it at the young mercenary.
When the mage's order learns their man is dead, they'll demand blood. They'll demand Jack Dagger.
His voice was sharp, raw with frustration. This job had been sloppy from the start. Lucan had warned Darius, don't use Jack Dagger as the mark. Old Sly Jack is too well connected, too well protected. He was a loose end that led straight to the Thieves' Guild, but Darius wouldn't listen. If Lucan was right, and he usually was, this wasn't just carelessness. Darius wanted Jack Dagger to take the fall. Maybe he had an old grudge. Maybe he had a score to settle with the Thieves' Guild itself. Something that was pushing Darius to take risks, stupid risks. Risks far beyond what Lucan had been paid for. And then, as if the whole job wasn't already a complete cock-up, Darius had picked up these two incompetent knobheads in Grimswell Crossroads because they were cheap. Lucan had seen this before. Arrogant, entitled morons, cutting corners and paying the price. With mercenaries, you get exactly what you pay for. You pay for nothing. You get nothing. But then, Darius can afford to take such risks, Lucan thought, with a heavy sigh, his shoulders sagging. Darius had nobles in his pocket, men-at-arms on the payroll, and the law of the Stygian Reach bent to his will. Lucan had none of that. He had only his neck, and right now it felt dangerously exposed. Lucan handed the knife back to the young mercenary. His voice was calmer now, as resignation and survival settled into him.
The Thieves' Guild protects their own. If they find out we framed Old Sly Jack.
He let the threat hang in the air, unspoken, but understood.
Let's get this job done,
he said to the now silent and sombre young men who had gone ashen as the blood drained from their faces.
I want my name burned off that blood contract. The last thing a man wants is for the Thieves' Guild to know his name.